Hi, I'm Sterling Perrin with Heavy Reading, and I'm talking today with Ron Johnson. Ron with Infinera. Good to talk to you again. It's
Good
been
to
a
see you,
while.
Sterling.
Yeah. So the topic is making IP over DWDM a reality, which of course is a project that we've been working with Infinera and OIF and some other groups on. So really wanted to get in and get some of your views and perspective on some of the key things that we're hearing and seeing as we go about the market. One of them that comes up time and again is the architecture looks great on paper. Telecom operators, CSPs are interested, but there's a number of issues that seem to be coming up that are at this point slowing things down. As you interact with your customers, what are you seeing as the primary challenges that need to be addressed?
It's a great question. I think that there's quite a few challenges that are still out there in terms of really making this mainstream and useful. Not only in content providers where it's been quite successful, but more in service providers. And one of the objectives, as I see it, is we need to have a multi-vendor routing environment combined with a multi-vendor pluggable environment over multiple line systems. And so the combinations of those things is quite a lot, and something that really requires a management solution to support it. It requires the organization to oftentimes be a little more flexible in how they deal with the transport side of the equation, how they deal with the packet side of the equation. The operational models there are very different. So we're moving something that had a very clear demarcation in the transport box talking to the router through a gray optic to that demarcation now sitting kind of in the middle of the pluggable. So you had one side that wants to get the visibility, get all the telemetry from the pluggable, and the other side that wants to be able to still control it and provision it. They don't want to necessarily give all the transport team access to all of to do inside the router to be able to provision that. So it becomes an interesting management challenge and an interesting organizational challenge to address that multi-vendor environment.
Right. So, and this has been coming up repeatedly, through interviews with suppliers like yourselves, and certainly with telecom service providers. You guys sell pluggables, so you obviously want this to work in the routers. What are you seeing in the types of deployments or engagements you have right now? What is it? Is it leaning, and kind of put the hyperscalers to the side for the second. Let's focus on the, what I would call telco environment.
Yep.
What are they doing? Are they doing nothing, or are they saying we're going to do this, but it's going to be, some sort of single vendor, or, just one this router, this pluggable only, or are they, moving forward in some way with multi-vendor
Right.
interop?
I think it's an interesting dynamic. What I would say is that a lot of the routing capabilities and software for 400 gig were really focused on content provider.
Right.
And so it's taken a while for 400 gig routers to be ready for telco applications. And just in general, I would say that's slowed down the adoption of 400 gig in telcos.
Mm-hmm.
As they're now getting the feature sets that they need and the sizing that they need of the router to support their application, they're now looking at trying to adopt these applications by putting the pluggables in the routers. And we're seeing this in very narrow cases, this line system with that set of pluggables, with that set of routers, and not having the full multi-vendor capability that they're really looking for and expecting. And that dynamic is really going to come from delivering the right management solution to be able to make sure that the operations of the transport team is not taking a step backwards.
Right. That's definitely a big deal, kind of an organizational and kind of people issues to a large degree come into play. Let me switch gears for a second and get into the pluggables themselves. You guys have invested heavily into pluggables. What in your engagements to date and kind of what you're seeing in the future? What are the attributes of the coherent pluggables that are most highest priority among operators?
I think it really comes down to performance and cost. It's a big cost advantage to move to a pluggable based architecture. Mm-hmm. What we're seeing though is that where the pluggables generally were really good at doing metro type distances, they've expanded over the last couple of years as the 800 gig interop modes for probabilistic constellation shaping have really stretched the limits of a pluggable into the long haul domain. That's also going to stretch the capability of 400 gig pluggables into the long haul domain. The other direction, it's moving towards the access, and we're seeing technologies that allow for both the transmit and receive to be put over single fiber. So in cases where you have an access environment that's very fiber limited, you can use one fiber for transmit and receive. There's also some interesting applications for point to multipoint where aggregation into an edge router can be tricky. It's these edge routers are not inexpensive, and you can quickly run out of ports if you don't have the right aggregation in the network. And so being able to have for instance, a 400 gig port talk to multiple remote sites, whether those be cell towers or business services, and aggregate that back into the edge, really provides some interesting opportunities for coherent as we go forward.
Right. So kind of these, as you move more to the edge, is where these types of BiDi and point to multipoint are becoming more relevant for this type of architecture.
That's right.
Is this, and so the OpenXR forum, you guys are obviously very involved in, is that where their work comes into play? Is it kind of under that umbrella, or would these functions fit elsewhere as well?
I would say a few objectives we have with the XR forum is to build a community of service providers to be able to work together on applications, but also to bring together our peers in the industry to be able to have similar, if not the same, capabilities around point to multipoint and bidirectional, so that for any application like this to take off, we need multiple vendors in this space. So that becomes important. Also to try to define the interface from the pluggable to the router, so that CMIs can be used for certain applications, but then there's this whole concept of host independent applications where you could get more robust telemetry, more robust capability coming out of the pluggable, out of the DSP, similar to what transport teams are used to in coherent applications today. We don't want to take a step backwards in terms of their visibility of their network.
Right.
We want to leverage that even in an environment where that pluggable is embedded into a router.
Right, which gets us kind of into the other big issue, and we touched on it in the beginning, and then it always does seem to come back to this: the management of the pluggables. The OIF work with the CMIS is defining interaction between the plug and the host. But then we have above that the network management, and it seems like there's a lot. Well, there's a lot of options there, questions and things that need to be resolved that moves beyond just simply the plug to the host. Maybe kind of talk through how Infinera views, I guess the network management and the plug to host, and what you're recommending to your customers.
Yeah, what we've really focused on is building a network management solution that takes advantage of each individual supplier's controller. So a controller for multiple different pluggables, a controller for different suppliers in the line system domain, a controller for different suppliers in the routing domain. That our network management will talk to each of those and orchestrate circuits to be built, troubleshooting, all of the FCAPS capability that you would expect in a typical network. We're not the only ones working on this. This is an industry-wide thing. It's something that is tricky though, because customers want a solution that's kind of independent of a particular supplier.
Right.
And so building that out, having that capability, we've used this a lot to show what the art of possible is. But it's some customers are willing to take it from a supplier and implement it across multiple suppliers.
Right.
Others are more timid about that at this point because there's still a lot to be proven.
Yeah.
And so that's an area where I would say we're investing heavily, and the industry is investing heavily, and we're going to see more and more progress over the next few years. I know we're talking about telcos here, but if you look at where this has really been successful to have a multi-vendor environment is in the content providers. And, they've really done that by defining the interface to the devices and then building their own management system to support that. Not all the telcos are going to have the resources to be able to do that. And so the industry is really working towards a way to provide that to those telcos and allow them to build this multi-vendor environment so that they can leverage the innovation that's coming from the line systems, the pluggables, and the routers.
Yeah, the reason I said in the beginning to put the hyperscalers aside is not because they're not relevant, it's but because they've been so successful. And so we're trying to see, how can the telecom industry benefit from what the hyperscalers essentially have pioneered. Some things seem to be able to port over the pluggables themselves, but then when you get into other issues, as you're indicating, that the management, it becomes more complicated in a telecom environment. So, I guess the question I'm getting at is, how much, it sounds like there's something that's done in the hyperscaler that doesn't quite, morph over to telco world without, I guess, some level of standardization or some champion, or I'm not sure what it is, but I mean, I don't know. Can you encapsulate what's
tricky one because
the missing piece, I guess?
On
what is
the
it?
content side, because of their scale, they had to build these kind of tools. They didn't exist. And so they built massive teams to build this tooling in their network to manage servers that translated over to network elements like switches and routers and transport systems. That's not the way that it's been done in the telco space. In the telco space, we had things like Telcordia, that was able to bridge that gap, and it's kind of pointing at a hole, that exists there, and we're trying to fill that hole from a provider perspective, and I think we're making great strides at showing a scalable solution to do that. It's just a matter of what is that telco going to really trust in terms of turning over their solution to a specific supplier who also has a play with the line systems or the routers or the pluggables. Yeah,
it's very interesting for me as an analyst, I'm sure, in your role. We're just about out of time, but I don't know, any last thoughts, comments, parting words of advice for the industry?
I think it's moving in the right direction. We're seeing more and more performance in these pluggables and more suppliers to create the right competition.
Absolutely.
I think the business case economically is very clear for the telcos. I think the routers are now have the feature sets to support at least 400 gig applications, and I think the challenge of solving the management problem is worth the effort to get the results of the CapEx savings and the power savings and all those capabilities that this promises.
It is a clear, one of those kind of somewhat rare, but a very clear business case, as you said. The numbers, CapEx, OpEx savings, it's quantifiable, but then you got to do the rest to it. But it's been great catching up with you, and all the best for the rest of the show.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Sterling.
All right, thanks.